everybody. I am Peter Klayman, and we are here today to talk about single code-based applications. Much like you, I also did not know what a single code-based application was when I started down this journey. So you have a chance to learn a little bit about what we mean today, learn about the benefits of the organization, and how a single code-based application might be right for you and your future state customer experience needs. So with that in mind, I'd love to introduce the panel here, and we're going to dive right in. So I'm joined by David Harrison and Jason Brewer. Jason, you want to do a quick little intro?
Yep, I've working in solution architecture at Bottle Rocket. I'm managing our cross-platform activities.
Awesome. And David?
I'm the Vice President of Technology here at Bottle Rocket, responsible for software architecture and software solutions at Bottle Rocket.
Awesome. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Peter Klayman. I'm the Vice President of Business Strategy here at Bottle Rocket. So let's kick things off. Single code-based application. David, what does that mean?
It's a phrase I've coined that because the term cross-platform is what the industry will typically navigate to. But single code-based solution is where you have a single code base powering all three domains of an application framework. When I say application framework, we're talking about Android, iOS, and web in that order, where you're thinking from a mobile first perspective. A single code base is what you would deploy that will give you a unified view across all three platforms, which will allow you in turn to have a singular base of, from your software delivery lifecycle process, of a single push to all. So any change made to one is applied to all, so you have a uniform view throughout the customer experience.
Wonder I didn't know what a single code-based solution was before this. Okay, well, I'm glad you coined the term. And when we think about that, Jason, what are some common frameworks that we could look to for single code-based solution?
Well, the primary one that we like is Flutter. It's where we feel you truly get a single code base. And historically, there's been cross-platform options that David mentioned before, which are typically based on web technologies and leverage the fact that there's a web browser and web engine on the device. But those all have a translation layer that's translating from web technology to native technology. And while you can write your application in, say, JavaScript, the web technology, you end up translating to native components. So the full stack is not a single code base. You end up with Java plus native components, and your solution is split three ways if you're supporting three platforms. Whereas Flutter is completely Dart all the way down, top to bottom. So you have, for the first time that we've seen and experienced, the opportunity to have a true single code base in your solution across all your platforms.
Some of those other solutions you're talking about are React, right? Are there any others that might be more
React
well-known
Native,
within the industry?
Xamarin, these are probably the most popular, well-known. React, I think, is the most popular today, React Native for mobile.
That's nice, though. It's nice to understand that there's a difference between React and Xamarin and Flutter, and only really one provides single code-based solution.
Yep.
So David, why are we talking about single code-based solutions? What are some of the benefits for an organization? Is it ready for prime time? How did we assess that? How did we get to this position that we like Flutter, we think it's applicable, we think it's performant?
The last part of that statement is the answer to your question. The performant nature of the single code-based solution we have decided to go for here at Bottle Rocket. Flutter gives you that performant nature of a native feel to everything you're doing. And because it's so performant, and I can get that performance across all three mediums with one code base, means that my cost of ownership, the total cost of ownership associated with a digital product, has now gone down considerably. And with that in mind, that allows multiple people to get into the digital medium that had a barrier because of the cost of entry. This gives you a better cost of entry. This gives you a better total cost of ownership. It allows you to maintain uniformity across your products, no matter what your customer, your end user, is using as a medium to consume that product. So this is the reason why this is now becoming more pertinent. COVID kicked off the digital necessity that we need to have to get information across our platforms, Flutter gave us a performance solution that will allow you to do that at a better cost base and get the same type of performance that you would get if you went native across all three.
So I love that. We're talking about, greater level of digital penetration in the marketplace as a result of COVID. I think we've all heard the stories around changing in buying patterns, changing in consumer behavior, the great 10-year leap in a 1-year period of time. But we have been looking in this space for quite a while. So Jason, you want to talk a little bit about how we assess cross-platform and single code-based solutions and how we compare that to maybe some of more native-oriented builds on iOS and Android?
Yeah. So we have in BottleRocket, we've tracked cross-platform technologies for at least the last 5 years, and even have done many solutions for customers that wanted to implement such solutions. The big difference now is, historically, these solutions, have been on what's called a bridged architecture. This is kind of what I was talking about before, that translation layer, whereas Flutter is non-bridged, direct. If you're familiar with the Unity game engine, Flutter is a similar architecture, direct to the screen, so you get that full native performance. Whereas the historic bridged architectures have had that translation layer, which has just not been up to snuff for us at BottleRocket that wants, full performance, high quality apps. And we weren't seeing the benefits because you are, at the end of the day, translating to native components. So you're still supporting a native component on iOS, a native component on Android, and there is additional integration effort. And we did not feel we were extracting the value from cross-platform from still having to support these native components and the integration you get when you have to migrate, say, from one generation of the iOS or Android to the next generation. Flutter seems to isolate us from those pretty well.
And I'm sure many people out there are saying, I've heard this story before. Didn't Airbnb try this whole cross-platform thing, right? So what's different now? Because I do think that's true. That did occur and that has happened, but we also have to be always open to changes in technology. If they were to go about it again this time, what differences would they see from 3 or 4 years ago?
The biggest difference with Flutter, I think, other than, again, the performance, is the maintenance costs. So people are actually seeing the realization of the single code base promise, which is that maintenance actually is going down for their teams. More and more companies are gravitating towards Flutter, not just for small startup type experimental apps, but large complex apps. They're actually migrating larger apps to Flutter and finding the benefit. Whereas, again, historically, say in the Airbnb experience, companies would outgrow cross-platform and then eventually go to native just because they were still having maintenance headaches, keeping up with generations on multiple platforms.
David, I'm sure many team members out there who can make a choice about what technology platforms they adopt are thinking actively about not being the first person to use a new technology platform. You don't want to get into a situation where you can't recruit developers, where you don't have support. What are some large organizations that are leveraging Flutter today? And what do you think some of those decision points were that they took into account to make that shift to Flutter?
I think the number one decision point with Flutter and what Flutter has that a lot of the other open source platforms today don't have is the backing of a very large software company that we all know, and that software company is Google. And Google is investing and continuing to invest into the performance of Flutter to ensure that everything around it and the ecosystem around it is strong enough to maintain itself over time. If you go into a lot of the Google apps that they produce themselves, they produce it on Flutter. So that gives you the ability to understand that I'm eating my own dog food, right? In a sense, because I'm not giving you something that I'm not using myself, that I'm not professing is a great platform to use. And I'm constantly iterating against that platform, I being Google. In the marketplace today, the biggest one out there is the commercials that are running. If anyone is a sports fan, if you look at the commercials that are running today, which is MGM on their playbook,
MGM Sportsbook,
MGM
right?
Sportsbook, that is running on Flutter today. So the commercials out there, the applications out there, it is a single code base, it is performant. If you tried it, any of my gamblers on the channel, you will realize that you had no idea that that was a Flutter application. And again, it's because of the robustness of the ecosystem. You have a very large backer into the platform itself. And that backer is also using the platform for his own apps to ensure the consistency and performance across. And I'll let Jason talk to you about some of the performance metrics that we measured here ourselves at Bottle Rocket against native applications, and we were astonished at how close in performance this was to a native build itself. Another thing that's we've recognized over time with Flutter is that there is no huge lag time from the releases on the native platform that Flutter picks up now. So before, you would have multiple releases of the native platform before the cross-platform bridge applications could pick those capabilities up. Flutter is not lagging that far behind as releases come out to the market. And once those releases are adopted, Flutter is always having that in their portfolio to be deployed.
So before we get into performance, because I think that's something definitely a lot of people on the technical side will be interested in, paramount decision factor is customer experience, right? For a very long time, we as an organization have always advocated a native first approach because some of those cross-platform solutions, whether it was React or Xamarin, just weren't capable of producing the types of high value, high touch customer experiences we consistently build. Is that still a valid concern amongst those who might be more on the brand side or the design side within organizations that are thinking about potentially switching to Flutter?
That was certainly one of our concerns always for cross-platform is the level of UI experience you could have. And we would even say, well, if we're going to do cross-platform, we have to have a box for our designers. Don't go outside this box because we can't guarantee a good experience. But when that's originally where we started with Flutter as well. But what we've seen actually is that it is so tailorable, so customizable, and the fact that it is going directly to the GPU to render that, no boundaries. We can do whatever they can design and be confident that the experience is going to be the same across all the platforms. So it has lived up to all those concerns we've had with cross-platform over the last 2 years. We've just been crossing them off. Community, even, Google's a concern even a couple of years ago because they're famous for, dropping their pet projects. And people were concerned about that with Flutter. We were kind of wait and see. But now it's the communities at critical mass. Even if Google were to say we're done with Flutter, there's actually more people outside of Google contributing to the open source. So that's no longer a concern.
What about performance? We have to wait about 10 seconds for these pages to load, right?
So again, Flutter is architecturally is like Unity. So the performance is native performance. It's on par with native. If you compare it to bridged architectures, you see, the bridged architectures being about 10x slower at logic intensive activities, whereas Flutter's right there with native performance.
Okay, so this might sound too good to be true. David, what are some of the trade-offs here? Are there trade-offs?
There's not really any particular trade-offs associated with going down this path of a single code base. The one thing that we've experienced here within Bottle Rocket is the sophistication of your application. So even if you're trying to get into the AR VR space with the engines that you need to support that, there's opportunities here with a single code base. Those are the most extreme applications, the most heavy use applications that will require a lot of CPU from a rendering standpoint on a device that we always was afraid of associated with single code base. Anything below that sphere, this single code based solution can handle. We haven't seen anything yet that's been thrown our way from a complicated application that this system can't handle and be as performant as a native application. So you can start off very simplistic and grow into something very dynamic, and this platform will grow with you over time.
Wow. Okay. So let's get down to the dollars and cents here, right? I can understand startup, building something net new. And we're not talking marketing sites here, everybody, right? We're talking logic-driven applications that display on both app and on web. it be helpful to go to market with both applications and a web experience that are both perform at the same time. Jason, does Flutter enable that?
Flutter does enable web. Web is still growing. It just came out of beta early this year, so we would still have some reservations on the exact web experience you need. But if you're looking at a web app, which has very much kind of the experience of a mobile app, just more responsive to any sizable screen, Flutter is absolutely there.
Wow. Okay, then for a large organization like an MGM, David, what would be some of the advantages that would come from switching from a native application? So you'd have a web team, you'd have an iOS team, you'd have an Android team, to a Flutter single code-based solution.
The number one thing you're going to gain is efficiencies and cost reduction within your software delivery lifecycle. Those are key tenets from a product perspective that anyone wants to judge, because you're looking at the return on that investment, and how do you get that investment into a position where it's not only giving you a digital penetration in your market, but you're driving cost out of the business at the same time. Those are things that COOs live for and CIOs live for, right? I can give everything that is important to my end user, and I'm driving cost out of the business at the same time, which means that I'm getting a higher digital penetration with a lower cost point, which is the magic point in any digital life cycle that you shoot for. This change will allow that to happen. Now, again, there's always overlap, there's always the cost of change, right? Once you get past that apex moment in your decision making, executing against this will be somewhat very simple to get going and start to build your new application and explode that new application out across all mediums.
Okay, to break it down very simply, right? You have a roadmap, you would pass that to your teams in the past. The web team would go take that down. The app team would go take that down. And in fact, there'd probably be Android and iOS that would both be working towards those outcomes.
That is correct.
In this new model, you have a roadmap. Where's that go?
It goes to one dark team.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty big, right? I mean, that's a big change.
Yep.
I think that's a change that people don't think about. If you think from a project management perspective, you're managing 3 tickets versus 1 ticket now. Everything gets a little more streamlined, right? Everything's a little more lean. Meetings are a little shorter. Behavior across all your platforms is the same. There's less variation in the issues you're tackling. Everything just gets a little smoother.
So many organizations are looking to take costs out, but other organizations, you might have a keen operator that realizes the same budget could do more. Is that an accurate statement here? And in fact, it seems to be like a lot more with the same budget.
No, absolutely. Again, your operating income goes up because your cost goes down, so you have more money to invest in features faster. So yes, with the same budget, you can achieve more because now you have more operating income to use to budget those features into your existing single code-based platform.
Okay, so if we had to summarize here, right? If you're moving to a single code-based application, you're going to see cost savings because you have a smaller team, or you can repurpose that team to go work on additional feature agility, right? Because now you can do more with the same team. You're going to see good performance. You're not using that bridge technology, so you're going to have consistent performance even in high logic situations where historically maybe some of the Reacts and Xamarins would fall short. It's a new world, right? It's a new world, and it creates a net new environment for speed to market, for being able to deliver your solutions on the channels that your customers want. Is there any closing thoughts you want to leave with both on the technology side and on the brand and design side when thinking about, is a migration from my current solution to Flutter right for my organization? Jason, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, my starting point, of course, is, why shouldn't this be a Flutter solution? Is Flutter absolutely as good as native? No, it can never be as good as native. You're still having a little bit of a cost in the application footprint, but the benefits now far outweigh those costs. And, it is the full mobile development experience top to bottom. So, mobile developers don't like to develop in those other technologies, but generally they like to develop in Flutter because it feels exactly the same. So there's no, many people will say it's even more efficient. They like developing in it. It's so simple.
Okay, it's good to know. David, closing thoughts, and then I have one more question for you, of course.
Closing thoughts. For any organization out there that's teeter-tottering between whether or not or to go here, let me leave you with this. In this new digital age and new digital penetration that's needed to be successful and to reach your customers on all mediums, you want to do that at a cost point that's going to allow you to continue to grow your business. You don't want to be capped at where you are and minimize the capabilities of reaching your customers. Making this move will eliminate that cap, give you a better ROI on what you're doing, and will allow you to grow at accelerated rates, because now you have a single release. Every time you push, it's a single release to all three mediums versus scheduled release across the three mediums. And the experience is now the same across all three mediums. So your end user is going to appreciate whether he's on web, iOS, and Android, he feels the same experience.
So maybe we've sold an organization for moving forward with Flutter, and that's going to be a lot of change. I think the logical first step is, are my developers capable of learning Dart? What's the level of effort there, right? Like if we're going to close on that thought and you're all bought in and you want to go headlong into Flutter, how reasonable is it to keep your current team and to upskill them to this new solution?
I'll let Jason take that one.
Yeah, we have developers that both have come from a Swift background on iOS and a Kotlin background on Android, and very smoothly made the change to Dart, and in fact go back and forth between Swift and Dart without much problem. I think it is a little bit of more of a learning curve for, say, a JavaScript developer coming from the website. They may say it took a little while to learn Dart and that programming style, but it's very similar, functionally and syntactically. It's still a growing language. It doesn't have, say, all the syntactic sugar that Swift or Kotlin does, but it's getting better. But certainly within a month, people are developing Flutter apps. And I would even say within 48 hours, expert developers developing a Flutter app.
Wow. Okay, well, you heard it here first. It's time to reevaluate if Flutter might be right for your organization. We understand what a big change that would be. If you're looking for some support in that, we're happy to help. We're here as well. And in case you didn't know, you should walk away with that term synthetic sugar. What was that?
That's not the term you should walk away with. Synthetic sugar.
I mean, it's just so good. What does that even mean?
My developers out there know what it means.
Okay, well, there you go. I might not know what it means, but I like the way it sounds. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you very soon.
Thanks, everyone.